My new girlfriend introduced me as her waiter at her birthday party I completely paid for, saying it loud enough that everyone heard, "This is just my waiter, he's been serving me all night." When I pulled her aside and questioned her, she rolled her eyes and snapped, "I have a reputation to maintain. My friends can't know I'm dating someone beneath my social status." I didn't argue or make a scene. I just calmly picked up my car keys, grabbed the $25,000 gift I'd bought her, and walked out while her guests watched in confusion. 2 hours later, she was blowing up my phone. You know that moment when everything you thought you knew about someone just crumbles in front of your eyes? Yeah, well, buckle up because that's exactly what happened to me last Saturday night, and trust me, you're not going to believe how this story ends. So there I was, standing in the middle of this ridiculously expensive penthouse that I'd rented for my girlfriend Zoe's birthday party. And when I say expensive, I mean the kind of place that charges more for one night than most people make in a month. But hey, I wanted to make her 25th birthday special, right? I'd been planning this thing for weeks, coordinating with caterers, hiring a live jazz band, even flying in her favorite flowers from some fancy greenhouse in Oregon. The whole 9 yards. Zoe Blue, yeah, that's really her last name, and she never lets anyone forget it, had been dating me for about 8 months. She was this stunning brunette with these piercing green eyes that could make you forget your own name. Smart as a whip too, graduated from some Ivy League school with honors. The kind of woman who turned heads wherever she went, and honestly, I still couldn't believe she was with me. But here's where things get interesting. See, Zoe came from money. Like, serious money. Her family owned half the real estate in the city, and she'd grown up in a world where dropping 50 grand on a handbag was considered casual shopping. Me? I came from absolutely nothing. Worked my way up from the bottom, built my own business from scratch, and yeah, I'd done pretty well for myself. But in her world, I was still just some guy who didn't have the right last name or the right connections. The party was in full swing when it happened. About 40 of her closest friends, and I use that term loosely because half these people seemed like they'd stab each other in the back for a good Instagram photo, were mingling around, sipping champagne that cost more per bottle than most people spend on groceries in a week. I was coming back from the kitchen, carrying a fresh bottle of that ridiculously expensive champagne she loved, when I heard her voice cutting through the jazz music and chatter. But it wasn't what she said that stopped me dead in my tracks, it was how she said it. "Oh, this is just my waiter," she announced to a group of her friends, her voice carrying that particular tone rich people use when they're talking about the help. "He's been serving me all night." Have you ever had one of those moments where time just stops? Where everything around you goes completely silent even though you know there's noise everywhere? That's exactly what happened to me. I stood there, bottle in hand, watching as her friends all turned to look at me with these amused little smirks on their faces. "Your waiter?" One of them, some blonde named Chloe who I'd met maybe 3 times, said with a laugh. "Zoe, you're terrible." "I know, right?" Zoe replied, not even bothering to look in my direction. But good help is so hard to find these days. The worst part? She wasn't drunk. She wasn't joking around. She said it with this casual cruelty that told me everything I needed to know about how she really saw me. After 8 months of what I thought was a real relationship, I was nothing more than hired help to her. I walked over to the group, still holding that champagne bottle, and gently touched her arm. "Zoe, can I talk to you for a second?" She rolled her eyes, actually rolled her eyes at me, and followed me to a quiet corner of the terrace. The city lights stretched out below us, all twinkling and beautiful, but all I could focus on was the look of annoyance on her face. "What's wrong now?" she said, checking her phone like she had somewhere more important to be. At her own birthday party. That I was paying for. "Did you just introduce me as your waiter?" She let out this exasperated sigh, like I was some child asking why the sky was blue. "Oh my gosh, Liam, don't be so sensitive. It was just a joke." "A joke?" I kept my voice calm, but inside I was screaming. "Zoe, these people think I work for you." "Look," she said, finally putting her phone away and looking at me with those green eyes that suddenly didn't seem so beautiful anymore. "I have a reputation to maintain, okay? My friends can't know I'm dating someone beneath my social status. It's embarrassing." There it was. 8 months of relationship, and that's what it came down to. I was an embarrassment. Now, here's where most guys would probably start yelling, right? Make a big scene, call her out in front of everyone, maybe even throw that expensive champagne at the wall for dramatic effect. But you know what I did instead? I smiled. "You're absolutely right," I said, and I could see the confusion flicker across her face. "Your reputation is everything." I walked back inside, set the champagne bottle down on the nearest table, and picked up my car keys from the bowl by the door. Then I went to the bedroom where I'd hidden her birthday present earlier that day. Oh, did I mention the present? $25,000 worth of custom jewelry from Tiffany & Company, a necklace and matching earrings that I'd had specially designed with her birthstone. The kind of gift that most people only dream about giving someone they love. I picked up that little blue box and walked back out to the main room where the party was still going strong. Zoe was back with her friends, probably telling them more hilarious stories about her waiter, when she noticed me heading for the door. "Where are you going?" she called out, loud enough that half the party turned to look. I stopped at the door and turned back to face her. The whole room had gone quiet now, everyone sensing that something was about to happen. You could practically feel the tension in the air. "Well," I said, making sure my voice carried to every corner of that expensive penthouse, "since I'm just the waiter, I figure my shift is over." I held up the Tiffany box so everyone could see it. "Oh, and this? This was going to be your birthday present. 25 grand worth of custom jewelry. But you know what? Waiters don't give presents to their employers. They get tips." The look on her face was priceless. Pure shock mixed with the dawning realization that she'd made a massive mistake. Her friends were all staring now, and I could see some of them starting to whisper to each other. "Liam, wait," she started, but I was already walking toward the door. "Have a great party, Zoe. Send me the bill for the rest of the evening. I'll make sure to add an appropriate gratuity." And with that, I walked out. Just like that. 8 months of relationship, gone in the span of about 30 seconds. But here's where it gets really good. Because you're probably thinking that's the end of the story, right? Guy gets humiliated, guy leaves, guy moves on with his life. Well, you'd be wrong. I was sitting in my car in the parking garage, still holding that jewelry box and trying to process what had just happened, when my phone started buzzing. Text after text after text, all from Zoe. "Liam, where did you go? Come back upstairs, we need to talk, you're being ridiculous, my friends are asking questions, answer your phone." I turned the phone off and drove home. 2 hours later, I turned it back on to find 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. The tone had shifted dramatically from annoyed to panicked to downright desperate. "Liam, I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean it like that, please call me back, the party is ruined, everyone left, I need to explain, where are you?" But the best part? The absolute best part came the next morning when my friend Jake, who happened to be dating one of Zoe's friends, called me up laughing his head off. "Dude," he said, still chuckling, "you need to hear what happened after you left." Apparently, after I walked out, the party completely fell apart. Zoe's friends started asking questions about who I really was and why she'd treated me like that. When they found out I was the one who'd paid for everything, the penthouse, the catering, the band, the flowers, everything, they were not impressed. But wait, there's more. Remember Chloe, the blonde who'd laughed about me being the waiter? Turns out she'd been recording everything on her phone for Zoe's birthday video. Everything. Including Zoe's charming little speech about maintaining her reputation and dating someone beneath her social status. Guess where that video ended up? Social media. All of it. The whole conversation, crystal clear audio and everything. Do you know what happens when a video of someone being publicly cruel to their partner goes viral in a social circle that thrives on gossip and drama? Yeah, it's not pretty. Within 24 hours, Zoe Blue became the most talked about person in her social circle, and not in a good way. Her friends, those same friends she was so desperate to impress, started distancing themselves from her faster than you could say reputation management. But that's still not the best part. Oh no, we're just getting started. See, there was something Zoe didn't know about me. Something I'd never bothered to mention because, honestly, I didn't think it mattered. Remember how I said I'd built my business from nothing? Well, that business had grown a lot bigger than she realized. I own property. Lots of property. Including the building where her family's main office was located. Yeah, that's right. Zoe's family business, the one she was so proud of, the source of all that old money prestige? They were my tenants. Now, I want to be clear here, I'm not some vindictive monster who goes around destroying people's lives for personal satisfaction. I believe in doing business ethically, treating people fairly, and honoring contracts. But I also believe in not renewing leases with tenants who create hostile work environments. 3 days after the party, Zoe's father received a formal notice that their lease would not be renewed when it expired in 6 months. Professional, courteous, and completely legal. No mention of personal relationships or recent social media incidents. Just a straightforward business decision. That's when things got really interesting. You see, Moving a major business operation isn't exactly like packing up your apartment and calling it a day. We're talking about relocating decades of files, specialized equipment, established client relationships, and about 200 employees. In a city where prime commercial real estate is harder to find than a unicorn, and roughly 10 times as expensive. Zoe called me that night. Not texted, actually called. "We need to talk," she said without even saying hello. "I'm sorry, who is this?" I replied, even though her name was right there on my caller ID. "Very funny, Liam. You know exactly who this is." "Oh right, my former employer. What can I do for you?" There was a long pause. "Can we please meet somewhere? We need to discuss this like adults." "Discuss what? I'm just a waiter, remember? I don't think I'm qualified to discuss business matters with someone of your social status." Another pause. Longer this time. "Liam, I know you're angry." "Angry?" I interrupted. "Why would I be angry? You gave me a very clear understanding of our professional relationship. I'm just acting accordingly." She was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. When she finally spoke again, her voice was different. Smaller. "I made a mistake." "Yes," I agreed. "You did." We met the next day at a coffee shop downtown. Neutral territory. She looked tired, like she hadn't been sleeping well, and for the first time since I'd known her, she wasn't perfectly put together. Her hair was in a messy ponytail, she was wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual designer outfits, and there were dark circles under her eyes. "My father is furious," she said without preamble as soon as I sat down. "I imagine he would be. Commercial moves are expensive and disruptive. You're destroying my family's business because I hurt your feelings." I leaned back in my chair and studied her face. "Is that really what you think this is about? Isn't it? Zoe, let me ask you something. Do you think anyone in your family's office saw that video?" Her face went pale. "What video?" "The one where you explained how embarrassing it would be for your friends to know you were dating someone beneath your social status. The one where you called me your waiter. The one that's been making the rounds on social media for the past week." She closed her eyes. "Oh no." "Yeah. Oh no is right. Do you have any idea what it's like for my property management company to be associated with tenants who publicly humiliate service workers? What that does to our reputation with other tenants?" I could see her mind working, finally understanding that this wasn't just about hurt feelings. This was about business. About reputation. About the very thing she'd claimed was so important to her. "I can fix this," she said quickly. "I'll post an apology, explain that it was taken out of context." "You think an apology is going to fix this? What do you want me to do?" What did I want her to do? That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? Part of me wanted to see her squirm, to make her understand exactly how it felt to be dismissed and humiliated. But another part of me, the part that had actually cared about her for 8 months, just felt sad. "I want you to understand something," I said finally. "This isn't about revenge. This isn't about getting back at you for hurting my feelings. This is about the fact that you showed me exactly who you are, and I believe you." "That's not who I am," she protested. "I was just trying to what? Impress people by putting me down?" "Zoe, you had a choice in that moment. You could have introduced me as your boyfriend, or your partner, or even just by my name. Instead, you chose to humiliate me to make yourself look better. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." She was quiet for a long time, staring into her coffee cup like it might have answers written in the foam. "So what happens now?" she asked eventually. "Now? Now you figure out how to move your family's business to a new location. And you learn that actions have consequences. And us?" I stood up from the table. "There is no us, Zoe. There never really was, apparently. I was just the help." That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, things have gotten even more interesting, if you can believe that. Because it turns out that when you humiliate someone publicly in today's social media world, the story doesn't just disappear. It grows. The video of Zoe calling me her waiter had somehow made its way beyond just her immediate social circle. Someone had posted it on a popular platform with the caption "Rich girl calls her boyfriend the help at party he paid for," and it exploded. Millions of views, thousands of comments, and suddenly Zoe Blue wasn't just infamous in her small social circle, she was internet famous for all the wrong reasons. Her family's business started losing clients. Not because of the lease situation, most people didn't even know about that connection, but because nobody wanted to be associated with a waiter girl. In a world where reputation is everything, Zoe had managed to destroy not just her own, but her entire family's. But the story doesn't end there. Oh no, it gets so much better. Remember how I said I came from nothing? Well, it turns out that nothing included a very particular kind of background that Zoe never bothered to ask about. See, before I built my business empire, before I became the kind of guy who could casually drop 25 grand on jewelry, I grew up in foster care. Bounced around from home to home, never knowing where I'd be sleeping next week, let alone next year. Know what you learn when you grow up like that? You learn to read people. Really read them. You learn to spot the ones who'll throw you under the bus the second it's convenient, and you learn to protect yourself from them. I'd known exactly what kind of person Zoe was within the first month of dating her. The way she talked about service workers, the way she treated people she considered beneath her, the way she name-dropped her family's wealth and connections. But I'd hoped I was wrong. I'd hoped that maybe, just maybe, she could see past all that surface stuff and actually care about me as a person. Turns out I was right the first time. So when she humiliated me at that party, I wasn't surprised. Hurt? Yeah, definitely. But surprised? Not even a little bit. I've been preparing for that moment since the day we met. See, here's what Zoe never understood about people like me, people who've had to fight for everything they've ever gotten. We don't just build businesses. We build networks. We build relationships. We build safety nets. And when someone tries to tear us down, we don't just have our own resources to fall back on. We have an entire community of people who understand what it's like to be underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed. Within a week of that video going viral, I started getting calls. Business calls. From people who'd seen the story and wanted to work with the guy who stood up to entitled rich people. From companies that wanted to move their operations to buildings owned by someone who understood the value of treating people with respect. My property management company's occupancy rate went from 85% to 98% in 2 weeks. We had waiting lists for spaces that had been sitting empty for months. But the real kicker? The absolute cherry on top of this whole situation? Zoe's family came crawling back. 2 weeks after our coffee shop conversation, I got a call from her father. Richard Blue himself, wanting to schedule a meeting to discuss our mutual business interests. We met in my office, the very nice office in the very expensive building that I owned outright. He walked in wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, but he looked nervous. Desperate, even. "Mr. Gray," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk, "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." "Has there?" "My daughter tells me you two had some sort of personal disagreement, and now our business relationship is suffering as a result." I leaned back in my chair and looked at him. Really looked at him. He had the same green eyes as Zoe, but where hers had always seemed calculating, his just looked tired. "Mr. Blue, let me ask you something. Have you seen the video?" His face flushed red. "I have." "And what did you think of it?" He was quiet for a long moment. I was disappointed in my daughter's behavior. Disappointed. I let the word hang in the air. Your daughter publicly humiliated someone who'd spent thousands of dollars trying to make her happy, and you were disappointed. "Mr. Gray, Zoe is young. Your daughter is 25 years old. She's not a child. She made a conscious choice to treat me like garbage because she was embarrassed to be associated with me. I understand you're angry. I'm not angry, Mr. Blue. I'm done. There's a difference." He shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. "What would it take for you to reconsider the lease renewal?" There it was. The real reason for the meeting. Not an apology for his daughter's behavior, not acknowledgement that what she'd done was wrong. Just business. "There is no amount of money that would make me reconsider," I said simply. "Be reasonable. This is business, not personal." "You're right. It is business. And my business policy is very clear. I don't rent to people who publicly promote the mistreatment of service workers. It's bad for my brand." He stared at me for a moment, and I could see him trying to figure out if I was serious. When he realized I was, his demeanor changed completely. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice taking on a harder edge. "The Blue family has connections in this city that you can't even imagine. We can make things very difficult for you." I smiled. "Mr. Blue, let me tell you something about people like me. We don't stay in business by being afraid of threats. We stay in business by being smarter than the people who think they can intimidate us." I stood up and walked to the window that overlooked the city. "See that building over there? The tall one with the glass facade? I own that too. And the one next to it. And the shopping center across the street." I turned back to face him. "Your family has connections. That's nice. I have property. In this city, in this market, one of those things is a lot more valuable than the other." He left without another word. But Zoe wasn't ready to give up yet. She started showing up places where she knew I'd be. The gym I went to, the coffee shop near my office, even the grocery store I usually shopped at. Always with some excuse about how it was just a coincidence, how she just happened to be in the neighborhood. "Liam, please," she said one day when she cornered me in the parking lot after I'd finished my workout. "We need to talk." We already talked. Several times, actually. Not about us. About my family's business. What about it? "You're destroying innocent people's livelihoods because you're mad at me." I stopped walking and turned to face her. "Innocent people? My father, my uncle, all the employees who work there. They didn't do anything to you." "You're right. They didn't. But they also didn't stand up when you publicly humiliated me. They're not offering to make things right now. They're just trying to save their business." "What do you want from me?" she asked, and for the first time since I'd known her, she actually looked genuinely upset. Not angry upset, but sad upset. "I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to learn that you can't treat people like garbage and then expect them to smile and take it." I learned that. I know I was wrong. Do you? Because this whole conversation has been about your family's business and their employees and their problems. Not once have you apologized for what you actually did to me. She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it again. I could see her thinking, really thinking, maybe for the first time in her life. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I'm sorry I called you my waiter. I'm sorry I said you were beneath my social status. I'm sorry I humiliated you in front of all those people." "Why are you sorry?" Because it was wrong. Because you didn't deserve that. Because you're a good person and I treated you terribly." I nodded. "You're right. I am a good person. And you did treat me terribly. So can we fix this?" "Zoe, the problem isn't that you treated me badly one time. The problem is that treating me badly revealed who you really are. You can apologize for your actions, but you can't apologize for your character. People change. Some do. But change takes time, and it takes work, and it takes actually wanting to be different. You're not sorry because you realize you were wrong. You're sorry because there were consequences." She was quiet for a long time, and I could see tears starting to form in her eyes. Real tears, not the crocodile tears she'd used to get her way so many times before. "Is there anything I can do?" she asked quietly. "Yeah," I said. "You can learn from this. You can become the kind of person who treats everyone with respect, regardless of their social status or bank account. You can stop caring so much about what other people think and start caring about what's right. And then will you forgive me?" "Zoe, I already forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean I'm willing to put myself back in a position where you can hurt me again." I started walking toward my car again, but she called after me. "What about my family's business?" I stopped and looked back at her one more time. "What about it? Will you really let them lose everything?" "I'm not making them lose anything. I'm just not helping them keep it. There's a difference." That was 6 weeks ago. Since then, Zoe's family has found a new location for their business. It's smaller, more expensive, and in a less prestigious part of town, but they're managing. The move cost them about $3 million and several major clients, but they survived. Zoe herself has been a lot quieter lately. The viral video eventually died down, as these things usually do, but the damage to her reputation in her social circle was permanent. Half her friends stopped returning her calls, and the other half only stayed in touch so they could gossip about her behind her back. Last week, Jake told me she'd started volunteering at a homeless shelter downtown. Not for publicity or social media posts, she specifically asked them not to mention it publicly. Just showing up every weekend, serving meals and helping with whatever needed to be done. Maybe she's really trying to change. Maybe she's just trying to rebuild her image. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. As for me? Well, life has a funny way of working out sometimes. That property management business I mentioned? It's been growing faster than I ever imagined. Turns out there are a lot of people in this city who appreciate working with someone who treats everyone with respect, regardless of their background. I've also been dating someone new. Her name's Iris Day, and she's nothing like Zoe. She's a teacher at an elementary school in one of the rougher parts of town, drives a 10-year-old Honda, and has never once asked me how much money I make or what kind of car I drive. When I took her to meet my friends for the first time, she introduced me as Liam, the most genuine person I've ever met. Guess what that felt like after 8 months of being someone's dirty little secret? But here's the thing that really gets me. Throughout this whole situation, people keep asking me if I feel bad about what happened to Zoe and her family. If I think I went too far. If I regret standing up for myself. And honestly, I don't feel bad at all. Not even a little bit. See, I spent years being told I wasn't good enough, wasn't smart enough, wasn't worthy of respect because of where I came from. I spent my childhood being shuffled around like an unwanted package, always being reminded that I was lucky anyone would take me in at all. I swore to myself a long time ago that I would never let anyone make me feel like that again. And when Zoe stood in that penthouse and told her friends I was just the help, she was trying to put me right back in that place. She was trying to make me small again. Well, guess what? I'm not small anymore. I'm not that scared foster kid who had to accept whatever scraps of kindness people were willing to throw my way. I'm a grown man who's built something meaningful with his life, and I deserve to be treated with respect. Zoe learned that lesson the hard way, but she learned it. And maybe, just maybe, the next person she dates won't have to go through what I went through. You want to know the real kicker in all this? The thing that makes me smile every time I think about it? That $25,000 necklace I took back from her party? I returned it to Tiffany's the next day. Got a full refund, no questions asked. But instead of keeping the money, I donated the whole amount to the foster care system in my old neighborhood. Specifically to a program that helps kids age out of the system and start their own businesses. Because here's what people like Zoe never understand: real wealth isn't about having money. It's about having the freedom to do what's right, regardless of the cost. And doing what's right? That feels a whole lot better than any revenge ever could. But I'll be honest with you, seeing her call me desperately from that party, watching her realize she just destroyed the best thing in her life for the sake of impressing people who didn't actually care about her? Yeah, that felt pretty good too. Sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate planning or careful manipulation. Sometimes it's just walking away with your dignity intact and letting people face the consequences of their own choices. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, you get to do it while carrying a $25,000 birthday present that they'll never get to open. So what do you think? Did I go too far, or did Zoe get exactly what she deserved? Because honestly, I'm still not sure I care either way. I'm too busy being happy with someone who actually appreciates me to spend much time thinking about someone who didn't. Though I have to admit, every time I drive past their new office building, the smaller, less impressive one in the worst part of town, I can't help but smile just a little bit. After all, reputation is everything, right? But you know what they say about justice, don't you? Sometimes it takes its sweet time, but when it finally shows up, it brings friends. 3 months after Zoe's family moved their business, I got a call that changed everything. It was from Dean Cross, a private investigator I'd hired years ago to help me track down some information about my biological family. I'd pretty much given up hope on that front, but Dean was thorough, and he never stopped digging. "Liam," he said when I picked up the phone, "you might want to sit down for this." Turns out, my biological father, the guy who'd abandoned me when I was 3 years old, wasn't just some deadbeat who couldn't handle responsibility. He was Richard Blue's business partner. Had been for over 30 years, until he died in a car accident when I was 15. You getting the picture here? Zoe's father had been working side by side with my biological father for decades. The Blue family fortune? Half of it should have been mine. There's more, Dean continued. Your father had a will. Left everything to you. But it was never properly executed because no one could locate you in the foster system. I sat there in my office, staring out at the city skyline, trying to process what I was hearing. How much are we talking about? Conservative estimate? About $40 million. Plus partial ownership in several properties that are worth. Well, let's just say the Blue family business is a lot more successful than they let on. $40 million. Money that had been legally mine for over a decade, just sitting there because the legal system couldn't be bothered to track down one foster kid. But here's where it gets really interesting. Remember how Richard Blue had threatened me in my office? How he'd talked about his family's connections and how they could make things difficult for me. Well, it turns out those connections were built on partnerships with companies that my biological father had helped establish. Companies that, technically speaking, I now had legal claim to partial ownership in. I could have walked into Richard Blue's temporary office the next day and demanded what was rightfully mine. Could have shown up with lawyers and court documents and watched him squirm as he realized he'd been threatening his own business partner's son. But that would have been too easy, wouldn't it? Instead, I did something much more interesting. I started buying up the debt on their new building. See, when you're forced to relocate your entire business operation on short notice, you don't exactly have time to shop around for the best financing deals. The Blue family had taken out several high-interest loans to cover the moving costs and the higher rent at their new location. Those loans got sold to other companies pretty quickly. And those companies? Well, they were more than happy to sell them to me at a discount. Within 6 weeks, I owned about 60% of the Blue family's business debt. Which meant I had a lot of influence over their financial future. Did I use that influence to destroy them? To call in the loans early and force them into bankruptcy? Nope. I just sat on it. Let them keep making their payments, keep struggling with the higher overhead costs, keep wondering how they were going to rebuild their client base. But knowing that if they ever tried to come after me again, if they ever tried to use those connections Richard had bragged about, I could end their business with a single phone call. That's real power, isn't it? Not the flashy, dramatic kind you see in movies. Just the quiet knowledge that you hold all the cards, even if the other players don't realize it yet. Meanwhile, Zoe had been having her own interesting experiences. Remember that homeless shelter she'd started volunteering at? Turns out it wasn't just a public relations move after all. Jake's girlfriend Chloe, yeah, the same Chloe who'd laughed at me being called the waiter, had been keeping tabs on Zoe's activities. Apparently, she'd become genuinely involved in the shelter's operations. Not just showing up to serve meals, but actually helping with administrative work, fundraising, even spending her own money to improve conditions there. She's different, Chloe told Jake, who told me. Like, really different. She doesn't talk about designer clothes anymore, doesn't name drop her family's money. She actually seems humble? That word, humble, coming from Chloe's mouth when describing Zoe Blue was like hearing someone say they'd spotted a unicorn in downtown traffic. It just didn't compute. But I'll admit, I was curious. So I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I drove by the shelter one Saturday afternoon, just to see for myself. There she was, wearing old jeans and a plain t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, helping load donated furniture into the building. No makeup, no jewelry, no designer anything. Just Zoe, working alongside people she would have looked down on 6 months earlier. She looked happy. Actually happy, in a way I'd never seen during our entire relationship. That should have been the end of it, right? Girl learns her lesson, changes her ways, everyone moves on with their lives. But life's never that simple. 2 weeks later, I got another call from Dean. Remember that inheritance situation we discussed? He said. Well, there's been a development. Apparently, while I'd been busy watching Zoe's transformation from a distance, Richard Blue had been doing some investigating of his own. He'd figured out who I really was. He's been trying to contest your father's will, Dean explained. Claims that since you were never formally adopted and your biological father never maintained contact, you don't have legal standing to inherit. Can he do that? He can try. But here's the thing, your father updated his will just 2 months before he died. Added a clause specifically stating that even if he lost contact with you, everything should still go to you when you came of age. It was like my biological father had known somehow that I'd need protection from the very family he'd been working with. Like he'd seen something in Richard Blue that made him want to make sure his son would be taken care of, even if he couldn't do it himself. So what's our next move? I asked. That's up to you. We can file the inheritance claim and force them to acknowledge your rights. Or we can wait and see what they do next. Sometimes it's more interesting to let people dig their own graves. I chose to wait. And boy, am I glad I did. Because what happened next was absolutely beautiful. See, Richard Blue had made a crucial mistake. In his desperation to contest my inheritance claim, he'd had to admit publicly that I was his former business partner's son. Which meant he'd had to acknowledge that he'd known exactly who I was during our entire relationship with Zoe. Think about that for a second. This man had watched his daughter date his business partner's son for 8 months, had seen her treat me like garbage at that party, had threatened me in my office, and had never once mentioned that my father had helped build the very fortune he was so proud of. When that information came to light, and in today's world, everything comes to light eventually, it didn't just make Richard look bad. It made him look calculating. Manipulative. Like he'd been using his daughter's relationship with me for some unknown purpose. The business world is small, especially among the wealthy elite. When word got out that Richard Blue had known his daughter was dating his late partner's son and had never disclosed it, people started asking uncomfortable questions. What else was he hiding? What other family connections had he kept secret? Could his business partners really trust him if he was willing to let his own daughter humiliate his former partner's child? The answers to those questions cost the Blue family about $20 million in lost business over the next 3 months. But the real kicker came when Zoe found out. Jake called me one evening, laughing so hard he could barely speak. "Dude," he gasped between fits of laughter, "you need to hear what just happened." Apparently, Zoe had confronted her father about knowing who I really was. Not privately, not in some quiet family meeting, but right there in their office, in front of about a dozen employees and several clients. You knew? She'd screamed, according to Jake's girlfriend who'd heard it from someone who'd been there. You knew he was Uncle Thomas's son and you let me treat him like that? Uncle Thomas. That's what she'd called my biological father. The man I'd never known, who'd died when I was just a kid, had been Uncle Thomas to her. Someone she'd probably heard stories about her whole life, someone who'd been part of her family history. And she'd called his son her waiter. The irony was so perfect it almost hurt. But here's where the story takes another turn, because apparently Zoe's reaction to learning the truth wasn't what anyone expected. Instead of being angry at her father for keeping secrets, or embarrassed about the additional humiliation, or worried about the business implications, she just broke down. Not in a dramatic, attention-seeking way, but in a quiet, genuine way that suggested she was finally understanding the full scope of what she'd done. She'd taken a leave of absence from the family business the next day. Packed up her apartment and moved in with one of the counselors from the homeless shelter. Started working there full-time, not as a volunteer, but as an actual employee making minimum wage. She said she needs to understand what it's like to live without her family's money, Chloe had told Jake. She's trying to figure out who she really is when she can't buy her way out of problems. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. Part of me was impressed. It takes guts to walk away from a life of privilege and try to build something real from nothing. Trust me, I know exactly how hard that is. But another part of me wondered if this was just another performance. Another way of trying to manage her reputation and win back public sympathy. I guess I was about to find out. Because 2 months after she'd started her new life, I ran into her at the grocery store. Not the fancy organic market she used to shop at, but the regular supermarket where normal people buy their food. She was in the produce section, carefully comparing prices on different packages of carrots, when she looked up and saw me. "Hi, Liam," she said quietly. "Zoe." We stood there for a moment, neither of us quite sure what to say. She looked different again. Not just the lack of designer clothes or professional makeup, but something deeper. Like she'd lost weight she didn't need to lose, or found something she'd been missing her whole life. "How are you?" she asked finally. "I'm good. You?" "I'm learning." She held up the package of carrots she'd been examining. "Did you know there can be a 60-cent difference between the organic and regular ones? 60 cents doesn't sound like much when you have unlimited money, but when you're making $8 an hour, it adds up fast," I finished. "Yeah. It really does." There was something different about the way she was talking. Less polished, more real. Like she was actually thinking about her words instead of just saying what she thought I wanted to hear. "I heard about your father," she said. "About him knowing who you really were." "What did you hear?" "That he's been hiding it for months. That he threatened you in your office without telling you that your father had been his business partner for 30 years. I nodded. "That's about right." "Liam, I am so sorry. I had no idea." "You had no idea because you never asked. In 8 months of dating, you never once asked about my family, my background, where I came from. You just assumed I wasn't worth knowing about." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "You're right. I know I'm right. Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "If you'd told me who your father was, would things have been different?" I thought about that for a moment. "You mean would you have treated me better if you'd known I had a connection to your family's money?" "That's not what I meant." "Isn't it?" She was quiet for a long time, still holding those carrots like they were the most important thing in the world. "Maybe it is," she admitted finally. "And that's the problem, isn't it? I only treated people well if I thought they could benefit me somehow. And now? Now I'm trying to figure out how to be a person who treats everyone well because it's the right thing to do." I studied her face, looking for signs that this was another act, another performance designed to get something from me. But all I saw was exhaustion and genuine remorse. "How's that working out for you?" She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "It's harder than I thought it would be. Turns out when you've spent your whole life being fake, learning to be real is like learning a completely new language." "But you're trying." "I'm trying." She paused. "Does that matter to you at all?" Here's the thing about second chances. Everyone deserves them, but not everyone earns them. And earning them means more than just saying sorry and making changes for a few months. It means proving that those changes are permanent, that they come from a genuine place, not just from fear of consequences. "It matters," I said honestly. "But it doesn't change anything between us." "I know. I needed you to know that I understand now. What I did to you, what my family did to you. I understand that it wasn't just about one party or one comment. It was about a lifetime of being treated like you didn't matter, and I made it worse. She was right. She finally understood. Zoe, can I ask you something now? Of course. Are you doing all this, the shelter, the minimum wage job, living without your family's money, are you doing it because you want to change, or because you want me back? She thought about that for a long time. Longer than I expected. 6 months ago, I would have said it was because I wanted you back, she said finally. But honestly? I think I'm doing it because I need to prove to myself that I can be better than I was. That I can be someone worth respecting, even if no one ever respects me again. That was the first completely honest thing she'd ever said to me. Good, I said. That's a good reason. Will you ever be able to forgive me? Really forgive me? I already told you, I forgive you. But forgiveness and trust are different things. I know. She put the carrots in her cart and started to walk away, then stopped and turned back. Liam? Yeah? For what it's worth, you were the best thing that ever happened to me. I just didn't realize it until I'd already ruined it. And with that, she walked away. I stood there in the produce section for a long time after she left, thinking about second chances and redemption and whether people really can change. Because here's the thing, I believe they can. I have to believe they can, or what's the point of any of this? But believing someone can change and being willing to give them the opportunity to hurt you again are two very different things. A month later, I made a decision that surprised even me. I called Dean and told him to proceed with the inheritance claim. Not because I needed the money, and not because I wanted to hurt the Blue family any more than they'd already been hurt. I did it because it was mine. Because my biological father had wanted me to have it, and I was done letting other people decide what I deserved. The legal proceedings took about 6 weeks. When it was all said and done, I was officially the owner of $40 million in assets, plus partial ownership in several businesses that the Blue family had been operating for decades. Which meant I was now Richard Blue's business partner. The very same man who'd threatened me in my office, who'd hidden my identity from his own daughter, who'd tried to contest my father's will. The look on his face when his lawyer called to inform him of the court's decision was probably worth the entire $40 million by itself. Our first official business meeting was interesting. He sat across from me in the same conference room where he'd probably made deals with my father for 30 years, looking like he'd aged about 10 years in the past 6 months. I suppose you're going to want your revenge now, he said without preamble. Actually, no, I replied. I'm going to want my dividends. On time, properly calculated, with full financial transparency. He blinked. That's it? That's it. I'm a businessman, Mr. Blue. This is business. You're not going to try to take over? Force me out? Why would I do that? You've been running these companies successfully for decades. I have no desire to fix something that isn't broken. He stared at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. However, I continued, there are going to be some changes to company policy. What kind of changes? The kind that ensure all employees, regardless of their position or background, are treated with respect and dignity. The kind that create clear consequences for anyone who thinks their job title gives them permission to humiliate other people. He was quiet for a moment. Are you talking about what happened with Zoe? I'm talking about creating a workplace culture that reflects the values I want to be associated with. And if I disagree with these policy changes? Then you can buy out my share of the business. Current market value, of course. We both knew he couldn't afford to do that. The move, the lost clients, the legal fees, it had all taken its toll on the family's liquid assets. Or, I added, you can embrace the changes and we can work together to build something better. He chose to work together. Smart man. 6 months later, the companies I co-owned had implemented some of the most progressive employee treatment policies in the city. Fair wages, comprehensive benefits, zero tolerance for workplace bullying or discrimination. The kind of policies that attract the best talent and create fierce employee loyalty. Our profits went up by 30% in the first year. But the best part? The absolute best part of this whole situation came a year and a half after the disastrous birthday party. I was at a charity gala, one of those fancy events where rich people pay $1,000 a plate to feel good about themselves, when I saw her across the room. Zoe. But not the Zoe I'd dated, and not even the humbled version I'd run into at the grocery store. This was someone entirely new. She was wearing a simple black dress that probably cost less than what she used to spend on shoes, talking to a group of people about the shelter's latest fundraising initiative. But it wasn't what she was wearing or even what she was saying that caught my attention. It was how she was saying it. With genuine passion, Real knowledge, authentic concern for the people she was trying to help. This wasn't someone giving a rehearsed speech about charitable giving. This was someone who had found her purpose. Our eyes met across the room, and she smiled. Not the calculated smile I remembered from our dating days, but something real and warm and maybe a little sad. She didn't try to approach me. Didn't make excuses to end up near me during the cocktail hour. Just acknowledged me with that smile and went back to her conversations. Later that evening, as I was leaving, I found a note tucked under my windshield wiper. Liam, thank you for showing me who I needed to become. I hope someday I'll be worthy of the forgiveness you've already given me. Z. I kept that note. Still have it, actually, in my desk drawer at home. Not because I have any intention of getting back together with her, and not because I think 1 year of good behavior erases 8 months of being treated like garbage. I kept it because it represents something important. It represents the possibility that people really can change, that they can become better than they were, that even the most self-centered person can learn empathy if they're willing to do the work. And that gives me hope. Not hope for us, that ship sailed a long time ago, but hope for everyone who's ever been dismissed, overlooked, or told they weren't good enough. Because here's the thing I've learned through all of this: the best revenge isn't making someone else's life miserable. It's building a life so good that their opinion of you becomes completely irrelevant. I'm engaged now, by the way. To Iris, the teacher I mentioned earlier. We're getting married next spring, and you know what? She's never asked me how much money I make, never tried to change me to fit some image she has in her head, never made me feel like I need to prove my worth to anyone. She just loves me for who I am. Imagine that. Zoe's still working at the shelter, still living in that tiny apartment, still trying to figure out who she is when she can't buy her way out of problems. Her father and I have a cordial business relationship, professional, productive, but nothing more. And me? I'm living proof that sometimes the best revenge is just living well. Though I have to admit, every time I sign one of those dividend checks, every time I walk into a building I own, every time someone treats me with the respect I've earned rather than the contempt I was born into, I think about that party. I think about the look on her face when she called me her waiter. And I smile. Because that moment, that terrible moment that could have destroyed my self-worth and sent me spiraling back into the insecurity of my childhood, instead became the catalyst for the best year of my life. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. Now that's what I call justice served cold.